Hi, let's talk about bark collars. Bark collars are essentially a collar that delivers an aversive when the dog barks. That aversive can be a sonic tone, it can be a spray of air or citronella, or it can be a static stimulation or a shock. So I do not use the sonic tone collars or the spray collars. The sonic tone ones don't really work. If they do, great. But if they work, the dog's barking wasn't that bad to begin with. Because if the dog is sensitive enough to respond to the tone, they're not all that committed to barking in the first place. But if it works, go for it. I don't use and I won't use the citronella collars because in order for an aversive or a correction to be fair, it needs to end as soon as the unwanted behavior ends. So I've talked about this before. So like if a dog is jumping or something and you use a squirt bottle with water, that's not really all that fair because the dog isn't going to stop experiencing the sensation of being wet with the water from the squirt bottle after it stops the unwanted behavior. So, in order for a correction to be fair, in my opinion, it should only last the length of the uncomfortable or the unwanted behavior. The discomfort or the aversive should only last as long as the unwanted behavior is being presented. So with the citronella collar, that sticks around a long time after the barking stops. Because dogs' noses are very sensitive. We might, if you're making soup, you walk in the house, oh, soup, great, that smells really nice. The dog will smell absolutely every ingredient in that soup. So their noses are incredibly strong. And I don't think it's fair to submit your dog to that. Submit? What's the word? Whatever. You get what I'm saying. To expose your dog to that for an extended period, it's just not fair because they're still going to be corrected long after they stopped barking because the smell of citronella is still in the air. Like if you walk in the room after your dog has been corrected one time with citronella, a half hour later, you're still going to be able to smell it. So that's not fair to the dog in my opinion. I do use the static stimulation or the shock bark collars, but I'm very particular about the brands that I use. So I really like the eCollar Technologies new bark collar that I just used with Hoosier. I've used Garmin Bark Limiter. I've used the Sport Dog No Bark collar. I like that one better than the Garmin, but the Garmin is great too. I will not use the cheap knockoff like crap Amazon collars, mostly because their quality control is not the greatest, and the threshold for what triggers a correction is not consistent. So sometimes a grumble might be okay, other times it might not be okay. Sometimes it might correct for that, sometimes it won't correct for that. The threshold for a correction is very inconsistent, and unnecessary or out of the blue corrections are very common with the crap collars. So a collar might give a correction if they're drinking water and the collar hits the side of the bowl. And that's not fair. That's not fair to the dog. I also don't use a tone to precede the correction. Some people do. Some people have a lot of success with it. I don't, because there's a couple reasons, but I don't want the dog to associate the correction with the collar. I just want him to learn that barking in that situation is not allowed. So in a crate, like with Hoosier, and Hoosier's the reason that I'm talking about this now, I don't want him to bark, not hear the tone, and think that he can bark because he didn't hear the tone. I don't want him to think that. I just want him to think that barking in the crate is not an option. Just that's it. So I mean that's just my opinion. Like I said, a lot of people have used the tone with success. Plus, I like to use the tone for other things. So Abe is trained. He's still trained, but I don't use it anymore because my remote on my their e-collars allows for 2 functions, and I use vibrate and stim. But Abe, I've used tone on his e-collar to mean like go find a place to potty, like hurry up and do it. So I like to leave my options open for that kind of thing. So, but anyway, bark collars are one of the greatest tools that we have as dog trainers and dog owners. They can stop nuisance barking very quickly, especially and it's nice, especially in a situation where like your dog's barking while you're gone at work and you have neighbors. Like, it's not going to take long before someone starts complaining that your dog's barking all day. And yes, you can absolutely, and you should absolutely take the necessary steps to help the dog get to a point where it doesn't feel like it has to bark all day. You should absolutely do that. But in the meantime, you got to stop the barking. Like, you just have to. And additionally, like with Hoosier, if I stop the barking, it won't go past that point. So normally the progression is whining, barking, and then nonsense in the crate, like biting and biting at the bars and trying to get out of the crate and things like that. If you stop it at barking, they usually won't go to the next step. You can kind of just cut it off at that point. And once they understand that barking's not an option, they typically calm down and just chill. Because you're keeping that mindset from escalating to the point where they're just in an all-out panic, anxious mind space. And that's not a good headspace for a dog to be in. So I really like bark collars. I don't use the, some collars, even the high quality collars have like an automatic function, meaning like it starts at the lowest correction, and if the dog keeps barking, it'll scale up until it gets to the highest, the level that will cause the dog to stop barking, and then it'll reset to the lowest level. I don't use that. I know a lot of people have used it and have success with it, and that's great. I don't like to use it because it tends to chase the arousal instead of squashing it. Okay, so you bark and it's uncomfortable. Dang it. Okay, bark again. It's more uncomfortable. God damn it. And then you bark again. It's like, God damn it, no. and that's a silly example, but you get what I'm saying. Like it nags, and I don't like to nag. I like to squash the behavior that I don't want when it's appropriate to do that. And with barking, that's very appropriate to do. And I just want to squash the behavior. So the way that you condition a dog to a bark collar, is you leave it on the lowest level stimulation, and you leave it for 24 hours, not consistently, but you use it as you normally would for 24 hours. And if the dog's still barking continuously or consistently, you bump it up to the next level. Leave it for 24 hours, not continuously, but you use it for 24 hours. Still barking, you bump it up. And then you bump it up into the point where the dog stops barking. So, and that becomes your level. So yeah, bark collars are great. I don't use them often with client dogs. Hoosier, we used it. But so far nobody else has needed one. Sky wears a bark collar every day. When I leave for work, she gets a bark collar on, and when I get home, she gets it taken off. And I do that because she is an anxious dog, and when she gets started barking, like if like a goat walks by and she decides that I'm going to bark at that goat, she won't stop. Like, she'll just bark, and it's annoying to my neighbors, I'm sure. So she wears a bark collar when I'm gone at work. She probably doesn't need it anymore, but she still wears it just out of habit. Abe has a bark collar. He doesn't wear it anymore. He doesn't need it. Yeah, so that's it. Bark collars can be great. You need to be smart about how you use them, but they're really great tools, and they certainly have a place in the dog world. So if you have any questions or want to talk about bark collars more, let me know.